It was early April 2009. I was a street sergeant in a very diverse area command in Las Vegas. This area command was unique because it had a square mile that had the most violent crime in the state of Nevada. It was predominantly African American, and it was predominantly impoverished, low-income, government-subsidized housing. But what made it unique was it had two mosques, a Sunni revert mosque that was filled with mostly ex-felons that had found Allah while incarcerated in prison. The other was a Nation of Islam mosque with a very strong contingency of Fruit of Islam, the gentleman you might have recognized selling newspapers in the middle of your intersections in certain major cities, that was started by Louis Farrakhan out of Chicago. And it wasn't these mosques that really were concerning for me at this time. It was the fact that there was drug dealers all around this mosque selling drugs. I was running a plainclothes unit, and we were chasing a very predominant drug dealer that had a very strong street name you will never forget, Old Wee Wee. I guess all the good drug names were taken. Old Wee Wee had eluded us for months, and he was selling all sorts of narcotics out of the side of his apartment. So we went chasing him one very, very warm evening, and as we chased him, and sweat began to trickle down our brow as we ran in and out of the bushes and through these dark alleys, Old Wee Wee was much faster than we were, and he turned a corner and ran into these big green gates that went into Masjid al-Sabur. And as he ran in, he essentially did one of these at us as he slammed the door closed to the mosque. And my guys said, "Sarge, what do we do? Do we go after him?" And I said, "I don't know. What is that place?" And they're like, "I don't know. It's one of those Islam places." I went, "Yeah, I think you're right. Can we chase him?" All of the Constitution and Bill of Rights and state law and federal law went racing through my head as I tried quickly to examine, did we have the right to run into this Islam place? Because you see, I had spent little to no time in a post-9/11 world studying about Islam. I was guilty, as many Americans, of studying Islam on Fox News or CNN. And what I knew about Islam was what the news had told me after 9/11. That Islamic terrorists had committed this horrific act of violence on 9/11, and that we thought they were bad. And I really, after that, didn't give it a whole lot of thought, because early in my career, I was busy chasing pimps and hoes and drug dealers and really hadn't given Islam a whole lot of thought. Until that day. And I went home very embarrassed that I didn't know, and I couldn't answer my crew, and I couldn't make an educated decision if we should chase that drug dealer that we had looked for so long. But after that, the journey became real. And I began to learn everything I could about Islam. Like a rabid dog, I read everything I could find, and probably ended up on the FBI watch list as I Googled many key phrases. But what I found was this unending well of information, from very academic to a book that I actually bought called Keep It Simple, Islam, the KISS books. And I read that thing cover to cover, and I made my guys read it. And I discovered John Miller, who wrote a book called The Cell, that really opened my eyes as to why the prevention of information sharing created this catastrophe we call 9/11. But more importantly, I figured out, as a sergeant, as a leader in this area, I better figure out who went to that mosque and what made them tick. So there began my journey. And I've been a police officer in Las Vegas now for 23 years. And about that time, I had about 9 years on. So I have spent the rest of my career dedicated to the Homeland Security mission because I knew a few things to be true. One, I was never going to let that happen again. Two, I was embarrassed that I did not know who made up the community that I was policing. So how could I effectively police it well? So we began developing a relationship within that mosque. It took many months, I'll be honest, until they earned enough courage to speak to us, and we earned enough courage to answer back. Eventually, we were invited in, and we learned that it was a beautiful place, and they had a school, a preschool. They had a health clinic for the homeless. They had every kind of amenity to serve someone. There wasn't kilos of cocaine stacked in the back room like I had imagined naively, and they weren't housing a bunch of drug dealers in the back. They were a community that was very afraid and disconnected from the police. And on the other side of that, we were somewhat afraid and disconnected from them. So that began what I would have never imagined to be my career of community policing. Because you see, when I hired out in the late 90s, we were still riding the wave of Rodney King. And if you said the word community policing, it was something that happened in a broom closet to guys that were broke, lazy, or ineffective. We, the street cops, we didn't do that. We chased bad guys, we put handcuffs on them, we took them to jail, and we didn't worry about the rest. But in 2009, for me, all of that changed. Because you see, I saw a very different perspective. Muhammad Atta plus 19 hijackers took the lives of 2,996 people on that fateful day of 9/11, which many of you in this room, I don't have to tell you, you were there. But we were able to do something that we in Homeland Security really like. We were able to put a label on it and say, international terrorism, Islamic radicalization. Yeah, we feel good about that. We labeled it, we put it in a box, we understand it. We were even able to go to John Miller, who had interviewed Osama bin Laden, and say, tell me about Osama. What made him tick? Why did he go on this extreme path to plan this? And why did Muhammad Atta and his 19 hijackers carry it out? The Sikh temple in Oakville, Wisconsin in 2012. 6 people lost their life on that day when Wade Michael Page walked in and killed them while they worshiped. This one we were also able to politely hang a label on. The federal government called it domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism fueled by racism. Yes, he hated the Sikhs. We feel pretty good about that one too. The police showed up, they get into a shootout, they shoot him, 6 people lose their lives, domestic terrorists. Okay, we can put it neatly into a box. As Homeland Security professionals, we feel somewhat accomplished about that. The Pulse nightclub, Orlando, Florida. Omar Fatin walks in and kills 49 people that day. 49 people. But you know what? When I look at this, I refer to this event as the Great Equalizer. The Great Equalizer, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, this event begins to take a little bit of a shift, right? He was he did believe he was Islamic, he was a Muslim, at an LGBTQ nightclub. Was there a grievance there? Was it ideological based? Or was it that maybe he did follow the Islamic faith and he did want to go to the LGBTQ nightclub, but felt that he couldn't, right? Maybe his faith precluded him, his family, his culture. But on that day, the media did something that became the Great Equalizer, for me at least. They used what the media does best, the broad brushstroke across this event. And CNN and Fox and MSNBC, they said, there's 3 people, 3 terrible groups on this day. And I don't know if they meant to do it, but I heard it clearly. They said, yep, another Islamic radical terrorist, right? Broad brushstroke. Which for the American people, we take that in and go, oh yeah, Islam, bad. Okay, yeah, I've heard this before. And then they said, yeah, because the LGBTQ nightclub, what are these gay people that, they probably discriminated against him or made some comment against him, so he was mad, he had a grievance. And the police, those cowards, they stood outside for X number of minutes and they didn't go in. Wow, so now all police are cowards. We could have saved lives, but we didn't. We stood outside and did whatever we were doing. So on that day, just like these other events that I'm going to tell you about, it provided an opportunity for me. The last one is 1 October, the Route 91 shooting in Las Vegas. Stephen Paddock goes in and kills 58 people on that day. 2 have died since then, for a total of 60. The largest, most prolific mass shooting in the United States. As you heard me say the other day, I was the incident commander out there, and I will tell you that having seen this investigation from start to finish, this is where we really see a change in shootings, a change in ideology. You see, Stephen Paddock wasn't crazy, and he wasn't drunk, he wasn't high, and he wasn't bipolar. The FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit came out and said he had narcissistic behaviors. Oh, okay, narcissistic behaviors. And if anybody's ever worked on or had the experience of swiping left or swiping right, you've probably swiped across a couple people that had narcissistic behavior. Yeah, I see head nods. Not narcissistic behavior. If you ever used any of the Backpage apps or have ever been on a date with somebody, you might have also ran into somebody with narcissistic behavior. So really, I'm not sure that I feel good about that label for him to go to the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay, shoot over 1,800 people with high-capacity, high-power magazine rifles, and kill 60 people. Narcissistic behavior. You see, this one we can't quite put in a box and put a nice, clean label on it. You see, Stephen Paddock wasn't dying of cancer. He wasn't broke. Matter of fact, he had millions of dollars in the bank and was, as far as we can tell, healthy. But he did spend a lot of time alone, aside from his girlfriend. He didn't really venture out much. He didn't really have a strong social circle or religious connection. You see, this is the first time that we see a separation into social isolation, true social isolation. It could be argued that Omar Fatin in Florida had it, but this is the first time that we really see no label other than pure evil. So what does that mean for us? Well, here's what it means for me in law enforcement and for those of you that have the opportunity to be a part of any community. You see, when Orlando nightclub happened, just as when the Sikh nightclub happened, we, law enforcement in Las Vegas, said this is an opportunity. When the Sikh temple shooting happened, we went out to the Sikh temples and said, hey, we're so sorry we haven't been here sooner, because we had not been, because we were focused on Muslim, Islamic interaction with all the mosques in Las Vegas. We had completely overlooked the fact that we had 8 other major religions. So in 2012, we did go to the 2 Sikh temples with our hat in our hand and said, please allow us in because we want to be part of you, connected to you, understand you, and vice versa. And thankfully they did, and they're some of our strongest supporters today. When the Pulse nightclub happened, again, I called my crew, we went to work. It was an early Sunday morning in mid-July, and I said, we're going to go to every Muslim mosque. We're going to go to every LGBTQ nightclub, which there was 16 restaurants and nightclubs in Las Vegas at that time, and we're going to apologize for not having been there sooner. And we did that, and they were so grateful that they cried, the majority of them, when we walked in. They were so happy to be connected. They said, we just want to feel connected to the greater whole. We want to be a part of you. We want the police to come in and not be afraid of us because we're gay and think they're going to get cooties. We want them to come in and ask for a glass of water and use our restroom in the summertime. I said, thank you. Because you see, when you're a part of a community that feels alone, separate from, disconnected from the greater whole, you will connect. It is human nature. You will connect to something bigger than yourself. A lot of us that heard Christian Piccolini speak, he used my favorite phrase. He said, people need 3 things to thrive at any stage in their life: community, identity, and purpose. And absent those things, you will find them somewhere, maybe online. But during COVID, do these 2 words ring out for anybody else? Loneliness, social isolation, completely separate from the greater whole? Listen, here's what happened. People are alone, socially isolated, disconnected from the greater whole, but they have their TV and their social media that tells them, hey, George Floyd happened, look what the cops did. Look at the murders, look at what the police did. And then we have civil unrest that really adds fuel to this social isolation and distrust of the police, and takes communities that don't have a connection to the police or anyone else and isolates them even further. You see, what used to be during 9/11 a very long, drawn-out process of radicalization. Maybe you found some chat rooms, maybe on MySpace, or maybe somewhere you were able to connect with somebody in Yemen or Saudi Arabia or Syria. And then you had to buy a plane ticket. And then you had to work up the gumption to tell your mom when you were living in her basement that you wanted to go over there and go to this training camp. And you see, it was a very long process and plenty of time for us, law enforcement, to go, we should probably look into this guy. He popped up on our radar. But now this time has been compressed so quickly because they can get on a chat room, they can read Inspire magazine or Dabiq magazine and go, oh, I can drive a box truck into a crowd. I can do that tomorrow. There's no preparation, there's no training, there's just inspiration and a trigger to violence. So my thought for you here today is, with this compressed time frame and the inability now to be able to put these shootings in a box, There was a time when we were coming up in the late 90s and early 2000s that we could put a label on them: Islamic radicalization, white hater, whatever it was. We were able to kind of find those things and label them. But now, and especially after Stephen Paddock, where we couldn't put a clean label on it, we're seeing ideological-based shootings, which we all feel good about because we can label them. But on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing grievance-based shootings. Grievance-based shootings is someone that maybe has a wife that has an affair, and they find out about it, so they go into the boyfriend's place of employment and they kill him and 5 of his friends. Grievance-based shooting. Or a guy that gets fired from UPS and they hire 3 Sikhs to take his place, so he goes in, he hates them because they hired 3 Sikhs. Grievance with a little bit of racism. But now these things are so frequent, right? School shootings at school. Maybe it's grievance-based because of the teacher, right? We're having this new wave of grievance-based shootings. I don't know if you remember last year in Lakewood, Colorado, but you had Lyndon McLeod come in and kill 5 people. To me, this one is fascinating and it's worth a look. It's one of the first times we clearly saw an ideology layered with a grievance almost perfectly. He had a grievance, but he also had an ideology, this misogynistic, very anti-feminist, anti-woman thing where he belonged to a manosphere. If you have a chance, there's some amazing writings on this, on his ideology, on his whole being of hatred towards women. So then he has his heart broken a couple of times, and he gets pissed. And so he goes in with this grievance, which was his trigger to violence, right? This grievance created a trigger to violence, and he goes in and kills 5 people. Because what we have now today is access to weapons easier than ever, access to low-impact weapons, trucks and cars and everything else. And we also have a great opportunity to build communities of trust. How do we do it? Problem identification, we just talked about it. More social isolation than ever before, more disconnection from the greater whole, more access to weapons and information than ever before. So solution engagement, we can't do it alone. We the police, you the community, you the fire department, you the federal government or private entities, we can't do it alone. We have to go in on this together. These are the very, very basic community engagement principles, and like I told you, it's nothing that can happen in a secret, quiet broom closet anymore. Every single one of you out here, this is your call to action. If you're not raising awareness within your community, if you're not educating the people on your workforce, if you're not out in the community going to their events, and engagement is bringing them here to your events, you're missing the mark to create the best bridge ever. And listen, it is a 2-phase bridge. The first one is between the law enforcement entity or the first responders and the community, right? So we can be connected to one another. The connection we have with our Jewish community is one of the strongest, I would argue, in the country. But it doesn't stop there. If you've ever had a mic drop moment in your career, I had one a few years ago when we went to Passover dinner at the LGBTQ Center. And we had the very high-end Jewish community, all the millionaires and billionaires in Vegas having Passover dinner, let me say it again, at the LGBTQ Community Center, being served dinner by transgender rainbow yarmulke-wearing employees. They were laughing and singing joyfully together, embracing one another, because you see, they saw each other. They've both been through hatred, discrimination, isolation, death, because of who they are, who they loved, and who they bow their head to when they pray. You see, we're not that different. It's just we allow these social norms to divide us. But we have an opportunity now to feel more connected than ever. These are just a few of the things that we do on our agency to bring people together. We have teams that cover every span, every socially divergent, disconnected group that we can possibly think of, and every single employee on our agency has a responsibility to be connected to, a part of, and giving back through one of these organizations. And I'm going to leave you with this. What can you do? I'm really, really proud to roll this product out to you. You guys are one of the first groups to see it. This Mobilization Indicators book was just released at the end of 2021. One of the detectives from my counterterrorism unit has been up on a fellowship with NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, and the JCAT group within them. This is what we call a tri-seal book. It's done by DHS, NCT, FBI, and we're the first state and locals to have a part in it. Listen, the mobilization indicators answers the question of what is suspicious activity, right? Because after 9/11, we said, oh, if you see a Middle Eastern male taking pictures in Las Vegas at the monorail, that's suspicious. He must want to blow it up. If you see someone standing by the Empire State Building and they look Middle Eastern, then it's probably suspicious, right? We really judged a book by its cover after 9/11. This removes all of that. It's a non-biased, non-religious based look at behavioral indicators. There's 42 behavioral indicators that we are going around the country teaching first responders, fire, medical, and police how to recognize and report behavioral indicators. Women, men, young, old, it knows no bounds. And it really is the ability to observe real, and listen, here's the best part, it's based on real attacks. It's not based on classroom theory. We took attacks from all over the world, we interviewed people, we broke it down, and answered the what on how to report suspicious activity. If you want a copy of this book, you can get it through NCTC, you can get it online, you can get it through JCAT or FBI. I will make the link available to David, so if you guys want to get to it through there, really, really beneficial. If you want the actual class, I have people that will come out and teach it for you. It's a game changer. And here's the best part, we can get our community involved. We can get them involved in teaching it, we can get them involved in knowing it, because at the end of the day, I promise you, at least for my community, it's gonna be the valet guy at Bellagio, it's gonna be the maid at the Wynn that sees something and goes, man, that guy exhibited A, B, and C, and calls it in. So it's our job now, and it's your call to action, ladies and gentlemen. The time is now. Violence, homicides, availability to violence, is bigger and more available than ever. It takes every one of us to get involved in this. We have to demystify what it is to have suspicious behavior, and we have to talk about the fact that after COVID, social isolation has led to people needing to connect. And who gets to that connection first is the race. Is it somebody online that will give them nefarious information? Or is it solid-based community groups, policing groups, that will give them something to connect to that is bigger than themselves and leads to positive action and not violent outtakes? Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. No, I think that's important. And, you know, we were talking about it the other night at dinner, especially for a place like yours, you fire a 23-year-old kid for being late 4 times, right? In you, it's a justified reason to let someone go, but in his place, you put X, right? You put an Islamic female, you put whoever. Is that enough to trigger that person, right? Does that 24-year-old already have some sort of mental health, right? Do they already have some sort of family instability, right? That's the grievance-based issue we're looking for. And so when it comes to those of you guys running private businesses, that awareness is really important. What is your policy? How do you let somebody go? Is there markers that were noticed and documented before then, right? Because you have to have that awareness of security for your folks, right? So if you don't have that in place, some sort of documentation, how does the person get walked out? What is their return policy? Can they come back on property? Because that's really where we see end of 20 and into 21, it increased like 500% on these grievance-based shootings in private companies. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a really interesting little nugget. So if you didn't hear his question, he asked, how do we overcome the trauma of 9/11 with communities, and what did we do to really bridge that gap? I didn't know how deep that gap was until I got into it. So once we got accepted into the first mosque, I told you it was a black convert, revert mosque. And the interesting part about that was, I told you that most of those people found Allah while incarcerated. Well, guess who put them in jail? People that look just like me, wearing the uniform that I wore every day, right? The brown paper bag. So we call our uniforms because they're brown and polyester and hideous. That uniform took away their freedom. That uniform took away their family's freedom, and maybe even their ability to feed their family. So deep within them was a true resentment for everything that me and my team represented. And the way we overcame that was, first, we never hid. We always wore our uniform there because we never wanted to be accused of spying or doing something underhanded. So we always went in uniform. And I told them that it was our job to change their perception of the uniform. And so we did that by asking them, what are the rules? Do we need to take our shoes off? And at first, I'll be honest, for those of you cops in the room, my guys were mortified. Sarge, we can't take our shoes off. I was like, why not? Are you gonna step in something? Like, what's the deal? And then, so it was a culture shift, and it took many months. Well, it's very hard to get our boosters unlaced and blah. Take your shoes off, right? So we would take our shoes off and go into the mosque. And then I said, I want to learn. Why do you pray 5 times a day? Why do you do this? What does the holy month of Ramadan mean? So what happened is they were thrilled to teach us. I learned how to wrap a hijab. I would go in the back and I would pray with the women in uniform. I would be on my knees, going through the process, looking at them, watching them, asking them, is this right? And my guys would go into the front. Was there a security concern? Maybe, but at the time I was too naive or ignorant to think about it. But what happened was, slowly, over time, they saw that we asked for nothing, because we didn't go in there asking for information. But what we did was, one day I had one of my guys ask the Imam Fatin, what can we do for you? And he was like, what do you mean? He's like, what can we do for you? He was like, really? Yeah, what do you need? He's like, well, come here, my brother. So we opened the door to the mosque, and as you looked out, and it was not in a nice neighborhood, like I told you, there was an empty lot, and there was an abandoned boat and an abandoned truck. They were all rusted up, and the truck was literally half on top of the boat, and there was a motorcycle, and just garbage. And he said, when our parishioners come out from prayer, this is what they see. And many times over there, there's drug deals, there's people shooting up, there's prostitution. He said, it's horrible, and nobody will help us. We've called the city, we've called the county. Nobody will help us. That's easy, that's what we do. So we made a couple calls, we went back to the station, talked to our folks that did that. 3 days, gone, cleared out. They couldn't believe it. We didn't do anything that great, didn't cost me anything. But guess what we did on that day? We laid the foundation to earn their trust, and we asked for nothing in return. And then the answer to your question is consistency, kindness, and transparency. We were consistent when going there, and we changed the narrative from, in the beginning, why are the cops here? And people were totally freaked out about it. To a few months into it, if we were gone for a day or we had calls or something, they were like, hey, where are the cops? That was the magic. When you get that from why are they here to, hey, where are they? Because we'd become part of the culture. We went through Ramadan, we ate dinner. If you've never had breaking of the fast Ramadan dinner, you're missing out. I've never eaten so well for a month in my whole entire life. And never been a place where they're more hospitable and more gracious. And then the year after that, we were at all the mosques. So we would have to go around and eat 3 or 4 dinners. And it was the most beautiful celebration and connection to a community that I'd ever experienced. See, that, folks, is community policing. It's not rescuing cats from trees. I'm sorry, Joe. It's the ability to really connect with people on their level. It's the ability to see people for who they are and ask for nothing in return, and remove the fear. So the answer is we went every day, every week, and we still go. A decade and 2 years later, we're still there. And when they pick up the phone and they need something, we answer, and vice versa. And I will tell you that from those relationships, they have seen things that just didn't feel right and called it in. And I truly believe that we've stopped 3 or 4 different attacks that were brewing in different religious facilities in our community. Can I prove it? No. Is it easy to put a ticker? Because we in executive leadership, we like to be able to tally things and have statistics and be able to measure goals. But sometimes the measurement is the absence of fear and the presence of community connection.
We've talked a lot about the challenges for leaders to change the culture within their organizations, and you've talked a lot about what you've done to educate yourself. You know, you had a chance to meet Christian Picciolini and learn about his community identity and purpose and that. What did you do to change the culture and get the buy-in amongst your crew and your division?
That's Bellavita's favorite question. Did he put you up to that? It's his favorite question to ask me. The truth is, it's a bottom-up, top-down approach. What do I mean by that? When we started this work, people laughed. They were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys are doing this. I can't believe you're going to go pray and take your shoes off in some place. I can't believe you're going to the LGBT community center and having these things. And listen, I pushed the bar in the very beginning. I was hosting community events at our headquarters where we would invite the communities, the 8 major religions, plus the LGBT community to come in. They each got 2 hours to speak, and we brought the officers in from every different division. And we had each community give a presentation on who they are, what they believed, and their interaction with the police, their biggest fears of the police, and so on and so forth. And I think the police were taken back. I think our cops were like, why would they be afraid we would do that? Well, you see, in Iraq, if you're a Muslim woman driving, X happens. If you're in this country as a Muslim man or a Jewish man, these things happen. The police in Mexico, if you've ever been pulled over in Mexico, are very different than the police in California. So we had to break down those mystiques. We had to break down the misconceptions that we had of each other, because it went both ways. So for a few years, we really did just a hardcore education internally for our officers. I met with every sheriff, and at the time I was a sergeant and a lieutenant, so I had to really work up and get them to buy in on this and tell them, look, if we don't get to this group of people, and I'll argue to you folks, I'll argue that when we're talking about recruitment, in terrorism, in gangs, human trafficking, the military, fire, and police, let's take those 6 entities. I would argue or submit to you that we all recruit from the same pool of candidates, somewhere between 18 and 26, wanting to connect with something bigger than themselves. If you're in the fire department, you're part of the fire family. If you're in the military, you're part of a brother and sisterhood. Police, same. Well, if you've ever talked to a gang member, they say, and Christian says it both in his book and in life, he said, I wanted to connect, I wanted to be a part of something, I needed a family because mine was gone. So the question is, how do you get to them first? Well, that was the easy sell for me on my agency. I told the sheriffs and my bosses, look, we have a huge opportunity here to get our cops to work as agents on behalf of the police department, to get to these folks and recruit them into all of those programs that I showed you, before the gangsters do, before the pimps do, before these people online that want to radicalize these people and take them in. We can do it, but we have to be out there proactively, in droves, all of us, every day. We got to get the fire department educated. So we put all of the firefighters in Southern Nevada through our TLO and FLO program, every one of them. And we use them to recruit, them to recognize, them to go, hey, we put all of our paramedics through it, all of our military guys, everyone. So we all had the same basis of understanding. Because it is a race at the end of the day to who gets to these folks first. So the answer is that we worked really hard to educate people, and then we worked really hard because I told you the second layer is us getting out into the community and building those bridges, but the second layer is the communities building bridges to each other. Like that day that the Jewish community and the LGBT community came together as one. That was separate from us. We had nothing to do with that. They did that because they knew that they wanted to support each other, because they understood each other on a very visceral human level.